students. I wanted to give you a brief overview of your Assignment 1 rhetorical analysis. And so you have a lot of details here in written form, but I also wanted to give you a little bit of verbal explanation since this assignment usually is a little challenging to students because oftentimes they have never written a rhetorical analysis before, so just by virtue of it being new to them, they need a little bit more feedback on what it is. So the goal of this assignment is to better understand a text. And by text, we can mean a lot of things in academia. When we use the word text, we can mean a written text, like an article or an essay, or an editorial, or we can even mean like a visual text, such as an advertisement or a commercial or a print advertisement, a video, sometimes even a movie, a film can be considered a text. But for our purposes of this assignment, I've pretty much narrowed text to be argumentative articles and speeches. So I focused on those two, and I focused on texts that are biased, that do have an argumentative edge to them. They do have something that they are trying to persuade the reader or the viewer or the audience member to see or do or believe. So when you're looking at these texts, I want you to be able to identify what you see as both the explicit and implicit arguments to its intended audience. So if you choose to analyze, I've got a few down here, a few choices that are hyperlinked. Let's say you choose to analyze Emma Watson's speech on gender equality given at the UN, the United Nations. I want to know, what is she arguing for or against? And you can even watch this speech if you prefer. I've linked to the transcript here, but there are other places like I think Brene Brown's The Power of It's very loud. But in this place, I've linked to her actual speech, and then you could go and Google the transcript. Sometimes that helps. I know that YouTube has transcripts also, but oftentimes they're not very good because they're done by a robot, and so they can get words pretty significantly wrong. Sometimes in humorous ways, if you've ever watched the closed captioning on your TV. Anyway, back to where we're supposed to be here, which is when you're analyzing these speeches or these articles, I want to know, what is the explicit argument? What are they saying or arguing on the surface? And then what are their implicit arguments? So implicit means unstated or indirectly stated. And we encounter these kind of things all the time, explicit and indirect or implicit, without thinking about it, right? If you come into the classroom and I see you're late and I say, Johnny, you shouldn't be late for class. Well, my explicit argument is you should not be late for class. That's what I want you to believe. But if you come into class and I pause in my lecture and I give you a dirty look and I stare up at the clock and I shake my head, well, I may have not said explicitly that I don't want you to be late or you shouldn't be late, but my body language has indirectly or implicitly argued that. And so as you look at these arguments, you're going to look at what is argued in the words themselves, but also the connotations of the words, the subtext of the words, the body language if it's a speech or something like that, or even the intonation of the words. And so we want to analyze all of that to say what we think is being conveyed in this text. To identify and analyze the components of an argument. So an academic argument will talk about ethos, pathos, and logos. And even within those ethos, pathos, and logos, there are elements that break down, or components. So logos is part of argument, and it deals with appealing to an audience's sense of logic or reason. But even within logos, you can break reason and logic down further. You can say when there's an argument, there are component parts like a claim, support, evidence, warrants, or assumptions. And so I want you to learn what those terms mean through your reading, through the lectures, through the discussion posts, through the quizzes, and then be able to identify those parts in one of these arguments, these hyperlinked arguments. And I say one, you're not going to do all of them, one of them in your essay. To select and arrange details appropriate to your analysis. So obviously I don't want, stream of consciousness writing where you just go through the speech and you quote this first paragraph by Emma Watson. Today we are launching a campaign called He for She. I'm reaching out to you because we need your help. We want to end gender inequality, and to do this we need everyone involved. This is the first campaign of its kind at the UN. We want to try to mobilize as many men and boys as possible to be advocates for change, and we don't just want to talk about it, we want to try and make sure that it's tangible. So when you're arranging details for your analysis, you may want to go through the speech chronologically and give your analysis of each paragraph, or you may want to group your paragraphs into, well, here's where I see ethos at work in Emma Watson's speech, and that's all going to be in one paragraph, whether it comes from the beginning or the middle or the end. And then pathos might be another paragraph. So how you decide to arrange your details is going to be up to you. I will have some documents giving you some outlines or templates for organization, but you don't have to follow them. If you have your own way that makes sense to you of organizing your essay, ENC 1101 and your high school writing should have taught you how to have a topic sentence in a paragraph, how to arrange details either sequentially or in order of importance, or from specific to general, a way that has been helpful for you to develop your ideas in writing. And then to direct your essay toward a specific argument of its own. So you have to have a thesis statement in this essay, and your thesis statement has to be based on how you see the writer using the components of argument to be persuasive or not. And we'll have a discussion post just on this idea alone. Let me see if I can pinpoint it just to give you a glance ahead here. I go down in the discussion board. Okay, so I'm not going to go into too much detail here. This rhetorical context page, I say your thesis here is your purpose for writing stated in a thesis statement. So this should communicate whether or not you find the text persuasive and why. So I gave an example analyzing Martin Luther King's letter from a Birmingham jail, and I said, using his knowledge of the Bible and his awareness of his audience's religious values, King effectively shows the 8 clergymen how unchristian their behavior has been toward the black community. So what I'm doing here is I'm trying to say, I find the text persuasive, yeah, because I said he effectively shows. So that communicates that I find the text to be persuasive. And why I find the text persuasive is because he uses his knowledge of the Bible and his awareness of his audience's religious values. So why or how is your creator able to be persuasive, or what detracts them from being persuasive? What keeps them from winning them over, the crowd over? And although you don't know, whether or not they're persuasive to other people, you do know whether or not you think the author is persuasive, the creator, the speech maker, that kind of thing. So it is a subjective assignment in the sense of I am asking you, the writer, for your opinion, that's going to be your thesis, about the speech or the text. But we are, as in most academic essays, going to try to steer away from the I, me, in my opinion type of phrases, because it undercuts your authority and you're also trying to persuade. So, you can be more authoritative and persuasive if you can leave those out a lot of the time. And we'll talk more about how to use the personal I in academic writing um, when it can be effective and when it cannot. So the description here talks about what a rhetorical analysis is, and I really found if you click on this link here that this is a great summary of it. And I'm not going to read the whole thing to you, but basically this focuses on the idea that a rhetorical analysis is not a summary of the speech. So I don't want you to summarize Emma Watson's speech to the UN and just tell me what she says in your own words. That would just be a summary or a paraphrase. Yes, you are going to have summary in there, but it's not going to be the main part of your argument. You want to assume that your reader has already read this speech, because I have, or seen this speech, and that what you're really doing is you're talking to us, you're explaining to your reader why or how this person is persuasive, or why or how they're not. So, my husband and I will sometimes do this with political speeches, because we often disagree about who we find to be persuasive and why we find them to be persuasive. So he might, or sometimes he likes to play devil's advocate. So he will, take a Trump speech or something we hear, and I'll say, well, look at what Trump meant when he said this. This is what he's trying to get people to do or believe. And my husband will say, no, I think it was effective for him to say that, because when he says that, people think this. And I'm trying to think of a more specific example now without getting too far off on a tangent. But, even when, what was his latest kind of incendiary remark? I think, Donald Trump said that he thought Barack Obama was the founder of ISIS and Hillary was the founder of ISIS. And I said, wow, this guy is really off the wall. He's claiming that the president founded ISIS when clearly there is a founder of ISIS, and it is not Barack Obama. He's the president of the United States. This is not, truthful at all. And my husband said, no, I really think he was speaking figuratively. He wasn't trying to imply, everyone knows Barack Obama did not start ISIS, but he is saying that Barack Obama laid the groundwork for ISIS, that, and he goes, and I think that his audience would be amenable to that idea, that would be persuasive for them. They do think that his attitude of passivity towards terrorism in the Middle East has engendered this current, ISIS buildup, that he has strengthened ISIS through his policies of non-intervention. And so my husband might take a read on Donald Trump's speech, and he might say that, whereas I say, no, the man is being literal, and he's untruthful, and he's manipulating details and manipulating the story. So in that sense, your essay is your own. It's your own interpretation of the speech and what you think it means. So this goes into that, but it also talks about your responsibility here is to break down a text. So I want you to use the language. You're going to learn a lot of new terms in the next few weeks from your reading and from the lectures. You're going to learn terms like ethos, pathos, logos, credibility, trustworthy, tone, style, and some of that might not be new to you, right? Because if you've taken ENC 1101 or ENC 1102, you might have had exposure to those terms. But even the idea of fallacies, maybe you've been exposed to that, maybe you haven't. We're going to study that. So I want you to identify if you think this speaker is fallacious at all. Does she or he, whether purposefully or unintentionally, do they manipulate evidence to make the argument fit their thesis? So this will, again, hopefully this doesn't overwhelm you, me possibly using terms that are not that familiar to you, but you are going to learn them, and they are very accessible in your book, and I think the lectures do a good job of familiarizing you with this information. And like I said in my welcome video, the discussion posts are meant to also give you exposure to these terms and make you more adept at using them and applying them. So they also give you some questions that you can ask while you're reading your articles and sources to help you, and even some steps for those of you who are more math people, more linear. And And then they give you some examples of what a difference is between a summary and an analysis. And so I really hope I think this is a great PDF. This is very helpful. Um, but if it is confusing to you, please come see me. I'm really happy to help explain it in different terms. So your paper should be 3 pages. It should cover these details. It should be about one of these texts. Please do not choose something different. If you're really, really excited about a different persuasive speech or text, you are welcome to email me, call me, or come to me with it, and I will take a look at it and tell you if it could be used. But if you use one that is off this list, that is not something I have chosen, then you may have a 0 and no chance to do it again, because this is what I know. So please don't choose something that is not from this list. And then finally, here's the rubric. This is what I look at when I'm assessing your assignment. I highlight little boxes here and there. So if you have more highlights in the outstanding section, then you get an outstanding grade. If you have more highlights in the strong, and these basically correspond to A, B, C, D, and F. So you can think about it that way when you're looking through it. And the other thing I just want to call your attention to lastly is that there is a folder in this week with sample student analysis essays that you can look at. And these are essays that have really done a good job of analyzing and creating their own argument. I've tried to pick some that analyze text. These introduction and body paragraph ones, these were taken from a documentary that students watch called No Impact Man. Some students have analyzed campaign ads, and I'm also going to include this one and one other one in there. But this is an example of a student who analyzed a YouTube video called 10 Hours of Walking in NYC as a Woman. And I'm just going to read the first paragraph and tell you what I think it does well, because that might give you more of a feel for the whole entire assignment. Verbal harassment is a big issue around the world. It can be defined by separating the words. Harassment is aggressive pressure or intimidation. Verbal means expressed in spoken words. Verbal harassment in New York has made women and men very uncomfortable. The video 10 Hours of Walking in NYC as a Woman was made by Rob Bliss to show people what women go through in the streets of New York. The purpose of the video is to help get people to donate to the organization Holla Back, which aims to stop street harassment. The video is of a girl who walks around New York without saying a word and gets harassed more than 100 times in 10 hours. Rob effectively informs his audience that verbal harassment is morally wrong by showing clips of evidence over a 10-hour time period paired with emotional connections or pathos to both men and women. So a few things I really like about this opening paragraph. If it gives you a sense of the subject matter of the topic. So what verbal harassment is, how verbal harassment connects to New York, that kind of thing. So maybe if you're analyzing any of these texts here, where did I go? If you're analyzing any of these texts, Brene Brown's subject matter is more about vulnerability. J.K. Rowling's is about how you can learn from failure. Michelle Obama's is about Hillary Clinton. Martin Luther King Jr.'s is about equality. And so they all have different subject matter. You might start your essay by detailing that for your reader. Maybe they need to know more about that. Maybe you can tell them something that they don't know about that. There are some different ways you can start your essay. And then finally they tell me what the purpose of the video is. And so, why was this article or this video created or this speech given? What prompted it? Usually people don't go around talking, giving big speeches and writing unless there's a big reason to. Like, they want to get Hillary Clinton elected, or they see that there's inequality between men and women in the way they're paid, or because they feel like vulnerability is not valued. It's something we try to hide when it really should be considered an asset and something to be displayed. So you want to tell me why you think, and this could be informed, sometimes it could be informed by research. So in the case of Martin Luther King Jr.'s letter from a Birmingham jail, yes, there was inequality between blacks and whites. That is the general reason he wrote that letter, but there is a very specific reason that letter exists. He gave many speeches and wrote many different texts about equality and civil rights, but why did this particular letter come about? So that might be something you need to research and use those secondary sources for. And then also I ask you somewhere in the introduction to summarize the text. So in one or two sentences, just tell me what it says. Yes, I've read it before, but what is the main gist that I'm supposed to be pulling out of this? And then finally, your thesis statement. And it doesn't have to be the last sentence of the first paragraph. We've been taught that in the five paragraph essay template, but that's not something we have to go with. It just oftentimes works out that it does fit well there because we want to lead our reader into something, and that's where we really have taken the time to get to our point. A few little things just to take note of here. This doesn't keep it from being a good essay, but MLA, I do not require you to count paragraphs, even if there is no page number, which there often is not when we're dealing with internet sources. You would just leave that off. And so this person I know did have an instructor who in the past favored those paragraphs, and she had told me that, and so we talked about it, but it's not MLA format. And then she calls the creator Rob here, but typically in academic essays, once we give the full name of a person, we would refer to them by their last name thereafter, so this would be Bliss. But this does give you a good sense, I think, of what the opening might look like, and I'll give you some other examples so you can look at those as well. The last thing that I wanted to point out before I exit this video is, oh, I can't remember what the last thing I wanted to tell you guys was. See, if this was real time, I could buy time, but I don't remember. Alright, well, we'll stop there, and if I think about it, I'll put it in another video or text or announcement to you all. So, oh, I know what it was. I'm sorry. Here we go. I wanted to just make a point about, I say that you want to include at least one quotation, paraphrase, or summary each from two sources minimum. So in addition to your speech or article, you want to find at least two sources. And so students will often say to me, well, like, what should I be looking for? And that's a part where maybe you want to research the background of the person. So Emma Watson, Martin Luther King Jr., Michelle Obama, J.K. Rowling, Brene Brown, find out more about them. That might be useful because when you're looking at ethos, a lot of times that has to deal with the creator, their reputation, their likability, their trustworthiness. You might look up the topic itself. So if we're talking about, the Black Lives Matter movement and the All Lives Matter movement, maybe you're not that familiar with it and you want to know more. So you might look up, and in a credible way, right? We're not talking about Wikipedia here. We're talking about sources that have identifiable authors, that are reputable, that are often maybe .edu sites or .org sites or things like that, that seem to have credentialed authors. So we do want credible sources, but you do want to use two sources in addition to your analysis of the text to supplement it. And please let me know if you'd like more information on that. And I'm going to sign off here so I'm not too long-winded, and I'll see you all online.